Dark Psychology Explained, and How to Defend Yourself. Published by Viridian. Chapter 1. Dark psychology is a phrase that carries a chill when you first hear it, and with good reason. It points to the shadowy side of human influence, the ways people bend other people's minds, choices, and emotions for selfish, often harmful ends. But that shadow has a shape, and this book exists to show you what it looks like, why it works, and, most importantly, how to move through it without being cut. This introduction lays the groundwork, what we mean by dark psychology, why it matters to you, and the practical mindset that will keep you safe as you learn. First, an honest definition. Dark psychology doesn't belong to some mystical, psychiatric category. It's an umbrella term for manipulative tactics and strategies people use to control, deceive, or exploit others. That includes a dramatic gaslighting, coercion, sociopathic charm, and the mundane, subtle guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail, or calculated flattery. It appears in abusive relationships, in the boardroom, in online scams, and in everyday social pressure. What makes it dark is not the technique itself. Many influence techniques are neutral, but the intent behind it and the harm it produces. Why read about it? Because ignorance is vulnerability. The people who use these tactics rarely announce their playbook. They rely on learned patterns, cognitive blind spots, and social norms that make people polite, trusting, or afraid to question. Knowledge doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you precise. When you can name a tactic and recognize its mechanics, you can step out of reflexes that make it effective. You stop being a target and become a person with a set of usable defenses. This book is practical, not academic. You'll find clear examples, realistic, everyday situations where dark psychology is at work, and usable countermeasures you can apply immediately. Each chapter drills into a cluster of tactics, explains the psychology that makes them effective, and gives defensive tools you can practice. I refuse to glamorize manipulation. I will not hand you a manual to exploit others. If you're here to learn to defend yourself and to help others, this book is your map. If you wanted to learn how to harm people more effectively, you're on the wrong page. A second important point, manipulation is a spectrum, not a binary. We all use influence. We ask, persuade, cajole. The ethics lie in intent and consequence. Dark psychology is distinguished by calculated disregard for another person's autonomy or well-being. That's the crime. Recognizing the continuum helps you spot where friendly persuasion becomes manipulative pressure. It also keeps us honest, because some of the tactics we condemn are ones we may have used ourselves in small ways. The goal here is not to moralize, but to equip. So how should you read this book? With curiosity and with boundaries. Curiosity because understand the mechanics of influence, cognitive biases, social heuristics, emotional levers, empowers you. Boundaries because knowledge can be heavy. Learning to spot manipulation is sometimes painful when you realize you've been the subject of it. Have a support person in mind as you read. Someone you could debrief with, test observations against, or role-play defensive responses with. That reduces the emotional load and helps you convert theory into action. You'll also learn to cultivate 3 mindset muscles that matter more than any single technique. Observational clarity. Most manipulators rely on distraction, emotional fog, or rushed decision-making. Observational clarity is the habit of slowing down, noticing inconsistencies, and asking the simple question, what does this person want me to do and why? Practice noticing small mismatches between words and actions. The person who promises consistent support but always cancels when you need them. The chat message that demands secrecy and immediacy. The co-worker who praises your skill but undermines your work in private. Those mismatches are the fingerprints of manipulation. Emotional regulation. People who manipulate often weaponize emotion: shame, fear, guilt, desire. If your default reaction to pressure is to comply, your emotional system is doing exactly what the manipulator expects. Emotional regulation doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means learning to name them, to slow their momentum, and to use a short delay before responding. Even a few seconds or the line, "I need to think about that," can break a manipulative cycle. Boundary competence. Boundaries are the most effective practical defense against manipulation. They are simple in principle but hard in practice because they require clarity, assertiveness, and a willingness to accept mild discomfort. This book will give you language, rituals, and small scripts to help you set and hold boundaries without escalating conflict. A boundary held calmly and consistently often disarms would-be manipulators more reliably than clever rebuttals. Finally, a practical promise. You'll leave each chapter with at least one concrete exercise to practice. Think of the book as both a guide and a training manual. The exercises are short: a reflective prompt, a role play, a small journaling habit, designed to strengthen the three mindset muscles above. Theory matters. Practice changes behavior. As you read, remember the human stakes. This is not an intellectual puzzle. Manipulation erodes trust, corrodes self-esteem, and can produce lasting trauma. The tools you will learn here are meant to restore autonomy, to give you back the ability to make decisions on your own terms. They are also meant to be ethical, designed for defense, not for exploitation. If you're ready, turn the page. In the next chapter, we'll examine the basic psychological levers that make manipulation possible, why our brains take mental shortcuts, how social signals overpower logic, and why emotions can hijack judgment. You'll leave that chapter able to identify the most common levers and to spot them in real life. For now, breathe. You've already done the most important thing. You've chosen to be informed. That choice is the first line of defense. Chapter 2. Most of the people who manipulate others are not inventing new magic. They are exploiting predictable features of the human mind. These are the mental shortcuts and social reflexes that help us get through the day, until a skilled manipulator flips them into tools for steering our choices. To defend yourself, you must first understand the levers. This chapter explains the core psychological principles that make manipulation reliable, shows how ordinary influence techniques become harmful in the wrong hands, and gives simple, concrete ways to clamp down on each lever when you encounter it. We begin with mental shortcuts. Your brain is constantly balancing accuracy against speed. When the cost of thinking carefully is too high, it defaults to shortcuts, heuristics, that usually work but can be exploited. Anchoring is one of the clearest examples. The first number you hear strongly influences later judgments. A seller lists a product at an inflated price. Even if they later offer a discount, your willingness to pay remains framed by that initial anchor. Reciprocity is another powerful shortcut. Humans are wired to return favors. A manipulator gives you an unsolicited gift or flattery to create an invisible debt. You feel obliged to comply in return, even when the return compromises your interests. Scarcity and urgency exploit our fear of missing out. Limited time, last chance, or artificially restricted access all push people to act before they think. Social proof, the tendency to follow others, is a shortcut that conserves cognitive energy. If many people are doing X, it must be right. But it's also a favorite tool of propagandists, marketers, and social engineers who manufacture the appearance of consensus. Related to heuristics are two cognitive systems we need to name because they matter practically: fast thinking and slow thinking. Fast thinking reacts quickly, emotionally, and often unconsciously. It's what lets you catch a falling plate or instinctively avoid a perceived threat. Slow thinking is deliberate, analytical, and effortful. Manipulators aim to keep you in fast thinking, emotionally charged, rushed, distracted, because your slow thinking can puncture their illusions. Time pressure, complex or jumbled information, loud emotions, and interruptions are all ways to lock you into the fast lane. Mirroring and pacing are social techniques that operate largely outside awareness. People like others who are like them. Matching posture, tone, or speech rate builds rapport quickly. That's benign in therapy or sales when used ethically. But in a manipulator's hands, it becomes a pretext for influence. They mirror you, earn your trust, then slowly nudge your choices in the preferred direction, paired with subtle dissonance, a small lie, or inconsistency. Mirroring makes the dissonance less likely to trigger skepticism. Framing and priming influence what you notice and how you interpret it. The same fact framed as a threat produces a different reaction than when framed as an opportunity. Advertisers prime our minds with images, words, and associations that bias later judgments without conscious awareness. Language matters. Words like investment versus cost, or danger versus challenge, steer emotional response and therefore decision-making. Commitment and consistency are another bedrock. Once people publicly commit to a position, they tend to behave consistently with it. That's useful for forming habits and integrity, but manipulators exploit it with techniques like the foot in the door. Ask for a small favor first, then escalate to larger requests. The initial small yes makes future yes easier. Conversely, the door in the face reverses this by asking for an extreme favor, expecting refusal, then follow a moderate ask that now looks reasonable by contrast. Authority and expertise influence behavior even when authority is superficial. Titles, uniforms, confident tone, and selected credentials can create an aura of authority that overrides common sense checks. The Milgram experiments and everyday anecdotes show how readily people defer to perceived authority. This heuristic is adaptive in many contexts. We often need to trust experts, but it can be weaponized by anyone who knows how to signal credibility. Emotional hijacking is central to many manipulative strategies. Emotions like fear, guilt, shame, desire, and outrage shortcut rational analysis. Guilt is particularly effective because it personally implicates you. Manipulators use guilt to tether your choices to their emotional state. Gaslighting leverages this by systematically undermining your sense of reality, producing self-doubt that keeps you dependent on the gaslighter for validation. Anger and fear narrow attention, making people miss options and accept solutions they would otherwise reject. Another lever is cognitive load. When your working memory is taxed, you're tired, distracted, or overwhelmed, you become more suggestible. Complexity, conflicting demands, multitasking, or constant interruptions are environments where manipulation thrives. Scammers deliberately create complex stories or urgent situations to exhaust your capacity for scrutiny. Finally, social identity and in-group dynamics matter. People conform to group norms for belonging. Manipulators cultivate in-groups, use language that signals inclusion or exclusion, and apply peer pressure to enforce compliance. Cults and high-control groups amplify this by isolating members from alternative viewpoints and punishing dissent. Understanding these levers is empowering because each one has a straightforward countermeasure. For anchoring, supply your own anchor by researching reasonable ranges before entering negotiations, or delay numerical decisions until you've gathered comparative data. For reciprocity, pause and notice the motive behind a favor. Is it conditional? Practice saying, "thank you," without immediate reciprocation, and reclaim the choice to respond later. For scarcity and urgency, remember that legitimate scarcity rarely requires instant compliance. Treat urgent demands as red flags. For social proof, ask who exactly constitutes everyone and whether their interests align with yours. To interrupt fast thinking, build friction. Say a simple phrase, "I'll think about it," or "let me check." Put a time buffer between the ask and your response. Create a decision ritual. When pressured, move to a different room, write the offer down, or call a trusted friend. To counter mirroring and false authority, verify credentials, seek a second opinion, and test consistency over time. Confidence is not the same as accuracy. To defend against framing and priming, reframe the question yourself. What is being left out? What alternative labels change the meaning? Emotional regulation is critical. Label the feeling out loud, "I feel manipulated," or "I'm noticing I'm getting anxious." Then take a breath and step back. Naming emotion diminishes its grip and gives your slow thinking a chance to reassert itself. Reduce cognitive load where possible. Sleep well, refuse unnecessary multitasking, and schedule important decisions for times when you are rested and alert. A short exercise will help you turn these ideas into habit. For the next 7 days, keep a tiny manipulation log. When you notice a persuasive moment, an email pressuring you to act, a friend using flattery, a salesperson invoking scarcity, write one sentence describing the tactic, anchor, reciprocity, scarcity, authority, etc. One sentence about your immediate reaction, and one sentence about what you did instead. At the end of each day, review the entries and ask, did I respond quickly out of habit or did I create friction? This simple practice trains observational clarity, strengthens the pause reflex, and begins to move influence from the realm of reflex into the realm of choice. These levers are not arcane. They are everyday features of human minds and social life. Learning them is not an invitation to cynicism. It's an invitation to responsibility. When you can see the mechanics, you can choose how to interact. You can refuse a manipulator's frame. Create time for reasoned choice. Protect your boundaries, and keep your decisions aligned with your values. In the next chapter, we'll examine a specific cluster of tactics, deception and gaslighting, showing how they evolve over time and giving concrete scripts to shut them down. Chapter 3. Deception is the oldest tool in the manipulator's kit, and gaslighting is its most insidious form. Both look simple on the surface, a lie, a false story, a denial. But their power lies in repetition, in the slow erosion of your confidence and the way they reroute your trust. This chapter follows deception from first whisper to full-blown gaslighting campaign. You'll learn to recognize the patterns before they take root, keep a clear record of events, and use short, practical scripts to stop the downward spiral. The emphasis is practical. Identify, document, and respond with minimum drama and maximum clarity. Start with deception in its ordinary forms because most manipulation doesn't begin with theatrics. Petty lies, omission, selective truth, and plausible deniability are all forms of deception that create uncertainty. A co-worker promises to send a report and then blames email problems. A friend says they'll attend your event and then claims they forgot. A romantic partner insists they didn't say something that you clearly remember. In isolation, these moments feel frustrating but manageable. The danger starts when the pattern repeats and the liar's denials become a reflexive part of the interaction. Gaslighting is a strategy built on a longer timeline. The gaslighter systematically denies, minimizes, and reframes your perceptions until you begin to doubt your own memory, judgment, or sanity. It operates through several recognizable moves. First, trivialization. You're overreacting, then denial. I never said that, then counteraccusation. You're the one who lies. And finally, isolation, cutting off your access to reality checks by undermining friends or making you feel ashamed to mention doubts. Notice how the moves are social and psychological. The gaslighter doesn't need to win every debate. They just need to make you hesitate again, and finally defer. A key reason gaslighting works is that your brain prefers coherence. When someone you trust tells a different version of events than your own memory, your mind looks for explanations. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you misremembered. Maybe you were too emotional. Good people are disposed to give others the benefit of the doubt. Manipulators exploit that inclination. They offer a simpler narrative, their version. And your mind, hungry for clarity, often accepts it. That's why the defensive strategy is not to argue louder. It's to restore clarity and evidentiary support for your experience. Evidence is your first practical defense. Start a small habit. When something important happens, an agreement, a promise, a charge, a hurtful comment, make a short, contemporaneous note, a one-line time-stamped entry in your phone, an email to yourself, or a private message that documents the fact, creates an external record that doesn't rely on shaky recollection. If someone says they called you last week, your log will show whether a call was missed. If a partner denies an insult, your notes can help you notice patterns. This is not about collecting ammunition to win fights. It's about preserving your access to reality. You deserve an accurate anchor that exists outside the fog of manipulation. When you suspect deception or gaslighting, use simple, low-escalation language that names behavior and sets a boundary. Personal attacks and dramatic accusations tend to entangle you in their frame and escalate the conflict. Exactly what a manipulator wants. Instead, have a few short, calm responses ready, memorize them, and practice saying them out loud until they feel natural. Examples include, I remember it differently. Let's put that in writing. I'm not willing to argue about who said what. We can review the messages. I'm feeling confused by what you just said. I need a pause to check my notes. And when you say that, I feel dismissed. Please don't rewrite my experience. These scripts do three things. They name the issue, preserve your dignity, and create a procedural path forward. If the gaslighting continues, raise the stakes gradually by involving neutral third parties or using written records. Say, because we remember this differently, I'll email a summary of what we agreed and ask you to confirm. That moves the conversation from memory to evidence. If the person refuses to engage in a transparent way, that refusal itself is informative. It's reasonable to expect cooperation when facts are disputed. An outright refusal to establish clarity is a red flag about intent. There are safety considerations to keep in mind. In abusive relationships, confrontation can provoke retaliation. If you suspect danger, prioritize a safety plan. Document privately, communicate with trusted people, and consider professional support therapists, legal advisors, hotlines. Gaslighting aimed at control often co-occurs with other forms of abuse. Don't gamble on scripts if your immediate safety is at risk. A short role-play exercise will embed the skill. Ask a trusted friend to play a neutral role and rehearse 3 scenarios. 1. Someone denies a promise. 2. Someone blames you for being too sensitive. And 3. Someone insists you imagine a fight that you remember. Practice the short scripts until you can deliver them calmly. After each run, ask your friend to switch roles and play a manipulator who refuses to acknowledge your notes. Practice escalating to written summaries and involving a third party. Rehearsal reduces panic and gives you behavioral muscle memory. Very useful when your heart starts racing. Another practice is the 2-column log. On the left, write the event, date, time, what was said / done. On the right, write your reaction and any evidence, texts, emails, witnesses. Review the list weekly. Patterns emerge quickly. The same denials, the same excuses, the same attempts to isolate you. Seeing the pattern in black and white helps you make rational decisions about whether to repair the relationship or distance yourself. Finally, remember that not all contradictions are gaslighting. People forget, mishear, and genuinely make mistakes. The ethical default is curiosity, not accusation. The practical default is clarity. Document, ask for a simple correction, and test whether the person honors transparency. If they do, the relationship can repair. If they don't, their pattern will reveal itself. Deception and gaslighting are potent because they aim not only to change what you believe about an event, but to change how you believe about yourself. The remedies are ordinary and stubborn. Externalize evidence, use calm scripts, rehearse responses, and when necessary, involve others. These actions shrink the manipulator's ability to rewrite your reality. They also rebuild something more important than memory: trust in your own mind. In the next chapter, we'll turn to emotional manipulation, guilt, shame, and pity, and the specific ways manipulators weaponize feelings to get compliance. You'll leave that chapter with short, humane scripts that neutralize emotional pressure without making you feel cold or unkind. Chapter 4. Emotions are the raw material of human life. They make relationships rich, decisions meaningful, and morality real. That same raw material is also the manipulator's favorite tool. Emotional manipulation doesn't rely on flashy lies or obvious coercion. It works by shaping the landscape of feeling so that the target's choices are narrowed toward the manipulator's benefit. In this chapter, we'll look closely at the most common emotional levers: guilt, shame, pity, love bombing, and moralizing. Show why they work and give concrete, humane ways to refuse them without becoming cold or cruel. Guilt is perhaps the cleanest, most effective lever. Most people grow up with a moral architecture keyed to reciprocity and responsibility. If you cause harm, you fix it. If someone favors you, you return the favor. Manipulators exploit that wiring by creating or exaggerating a sense of obligation. A partner will remind you of all they sacrificed for you when you decline a request. A friend will rehearse past kindnesses as moral IOUs. A boss will frame personal favors as proof of loyalty, expecting quiescence in return. The tactic is simple: make you feel responsible for their well-being or sense of self-worth, then demand compliance as a remedy. Shame is darker because it attacks identity. Shame says there is something inherently wrong with you, lazy, selfish, incompetent, and implies that approval depends on changing that core. Unlike guilt, which points to specific behavior, shame targets who you are. Manipulators use shame subtly: a sarcastic joke about your weaknesses, a public correction that humiliates, or a pattern of withdrawing affection whenever you express a need. Shame works because humans are social animals. Acceptance matters for survival and status. When approval is conditioned on silence or subservience, people trade their autonomy for belonging. Pity is the softer cousin. The manipulator cultivates a dependent or tragic persona to elicit rescue. This can look like chronic crisis, melodrama, or a constant stream of woes that require emotional labor from others. Pity is effective because it triggers caretaking instincts. You don't want to abandon someone who seems helpless, so you keep giving. Over time, the rescuer becomes complicit in the cycle, sacrificing their needs to keep the manipulator afloat. Love bombing is the high-gloss version of emotional leverage. In seduction and cult recruitment, manipulators shower attention, gifts, and adulation early to create intense attachment. Once attachment is established, the compliments vanish and are replaced by demands or criticism. The victim remains hooked, chasing the early highs. The pattern: intense praise, rapid closeness, then conditional affection, creates powerful craving and confusion. Moralizing and righteous indignation are another set of tools. A manipulator frames their request as morally obvious. If you really cared, you'd do X. This converts a personal preference into a moral test. It's hard to refuse without feeling or looking selfish. Triangulation, bringing a third person's opinion into a conflict, intensifies this. Everyone said I was right. Why won't you? Turning the target into the outlier. Why are these tactics so effective? 2 reasons. 1. Emotions short-circuit deliberation. When someone is crying, angry, or shaming, your brain prioritizes repair and restoration. 2. Social emotions are tied to identity and belonging. Threats to social standing or moral self-concept feel like threats to survival. The practical consequence is that emotional manipulation often works because it looks like the normal cost of being a good person. Defending against emotional manipulation begins with 3 capacities: awareness, containment, and boundary enforcement. Awareness means noticing not just the content of the appeal, but its structure, who benefits, what is being asked, and whether your sense of obligation has been engineered. Containment means regulating your emotional response so that you can think clearly, not to suppress compassion, but to prevent it from driving you into harmful concessions. Boundary enforcement means stating limits and following through calmly. Some short scripts you can use when guilt or moralizing hits. Keep them simple and steady. I want to help, but I can't do that right now. I hear you're upset. I'm not willing to be shamed into a decision. I care about you, and I'm also responsible for my own needs. I don't accept being held responsible for someone else's choices. How can we solve this without making me take on all the cost? When pity or chronic crisis is used to extract support, you can respond with compassion plus structure. I'm sorry you're struggling. I can help by specific action, but I can't be responsible for solving this entirely. Offer concrete options with capped commitments. A one-time call, a list of resources, or refer professional help, rather than open-ended rescue. The gray rock technique is useful when someone weaponizes emotional drama to gain control. Remain bland, non-reactive, and brief. Don't feed theatrics with long explanations or emotional responses. This is not cruelty. It's a tactic to deprive the manipulator of the reaction they crave. Practice labeling emotions out loud. It weakens their automatic pull. When someone lashes out, say quietly but firmly, I notice you're really angry right now. When guilt appears, say, I'm noticing pressure to feel guilty. I need a moment. Naming reduces intensity and buys time for reason. Containment rituals help. When an emotional demand arrives, create a pause. Take a breath, count to 10, or say, let me step away and think. If the manipulator insists, use a boundary that links words to consequences. If you keep shaming me, I will leave this conversation. Follow through if needed. Consequences must be real and proportional. Leaving the room, ending a call, or reminding a person you'll take the discussion up later. A short role play will strengthen these responses. With a friend, rehearse 3 scenes. 1. A partner who says, if you love me, you do this. 2. A family member who uses shame to control a decision. And 3. A friend who routinely seeks rescue without taking responsibility. Practice the short scripts, then practice the follow-through, stepping away, offering a cap help, or ending the conversation. Repeat until the words come without panic. A useful daily exercise is the guilt audit. For 1 week, keep a small note of moments when you felt guilty and what prompted it. Ask 2 questions after each entry. Is this my responsibility? And what would a reasonable response look like? Over time, patterns emerge. Who tends to guilt trip you? How often you give in? And what alternative responses actually reduce conflict? Finally, remember the ethical line. Defending yourself doesn't mean becoming unkind. Compassion and firmness can coexist. The point is not to harden your heart, but to keep it aligned with your values and your autonomy. When you refuse to be the default rescuer, you free yourself to give help on terms that are sustainable and truly helpful. Emotional manipulation is painful because it exploits our best instincts. The remedy is ordinary and stubborn. See the structure of the appeal, name what's happening, pause, and respond with clear limits. Those small acts rebuild the authority of your own feelings and reduce the manipulator's power. In the next chapter, we'll examine how charm, charisma, and social status are weaponized, the suave smiles and confident claims that mask exploitive intent, and how to tell authenticity from performance. Chapter 5. Charm and charisma are tools people admire. They open doors, smooth conflicts, and make social life easier. But those same gifts, magnetic smile, effortless confidence, polished stories, can be weaponized. In this chapter, we follow the arc of charismatic manipulation, how performance becomes a shield for deception, how status signals short-circuit scrutiny, and how you can learn to appreciate warmth and confidence without surrendering judgment. The goal is simple. Keep your radar on while you enjoy the company. Begin with a practical distinction. Charisma is a package of skills, presence, storytelling, emotional attunement that can be used ethically or unethically. Authentic charisma aligns behavior and values. Performative charisma masks inconsistencies and exploits social lubrication to influence without accountability. The manipulator's version is not an absence of charm, but a strategic use of it. They are excellent at getting you to like them quickly so that you stop verifying facts, ignore small mismatches, and accept bigger favors later. There are reliable markers of performative charisma. First, speed. The manipulator accelerates intimacy. In ordinary relationships, trust grows over time as people reveal vulnerability gradually. A charismatic manipulator compresses that timeline with intense attention, grand compliments, rapid self-disclosures, or declarations of destiny. We were meant to meet, or I've never felt this way before. That rush creates emotional dependency. You feel special and then feel indebted. Second, selective congruence. They match your values in conversation, but fail to live them when stakes rise. They'll talk about loyalty while subtly testing whether you'll tolerate small betrayals. Third, transactional warmth. Their kindness often comes with an unstated ledger. A compliment is followed by a request. A favor is an opening for obligation. Fourth, a poor track record under pressure. Charisma hides in smooth interactions, but cracks under accountability. Watch how they handle conflict, deadlines, or follow through. Charisma fades when responsibility is due. Charisma works because humans use simple social heuristics. We infer competence from confidence, and we infer trustworthiness from warmth. This is efficient. You can't test every person's integrity, so you use these cues. Manipulators understand this and deliberately amplify those cues. The trick for defense is not to become suspicious of warmth itself, but to slow the inference process. Warm plus confident is not equal to trustworthy. Treat charisma as a reason to inquire, not to concede. One practical habit is to separate liking from decision-making. You can enjoy someone's company and still withhold important trust. When flattered or charmed, create a small buffer. Delay financial decisions, hold off on sharing sensitive information, and avoid making promises about major life choices. Use phrases that preserve the relationship but postpone commitment. I'm enjoying this. Can we discuss that next week? Or thanks. I need some time to think. Those little pauses prevent the heat of attraction from becoming the basis for consequential choices. Another defense is to test consistency with small, non-threatening requests. If someone claims competence or honesty, ask for a simple example or confirmation you can verify. When a professional brags about their network, ask for a reference. When a potential partner swears they're totally independent, notice whether they actually take responsibility for small, shared tasks. Good people usually welcome modest checks. Manipulators often deflect or gaslight those requests. Language cues matter. Charismatic manipulators often use sweeping generalizations and absolutes. Everyone knows. You'll never find anyone better as persuasive shortcuts. They also deploy persuasive stories that highlight their heroism or victimhood in ways that justify exceptions. Listen for narratives that demand special treatment because of an alleged past. Those stories often explain why rules don't apply to them now. Ask for concrete evidence, dates, names, or documentation. A genuine narrative will survive gentle scrutiny. A manufactured one will fray. Status signaling is another vector. Titles, luxury items, name-dropping, or curated social media are designed to imply competence and connections. These signals are not proof. Verify the underlying competence by looking for measurable results or independent endorsements. If someone brags about a startup, check whether there's an actual product, customers, or credible press. If they claim influence, ask subtly who else you might talk to who can confirm. Social proof is useful only when it's specific and verifiable. Charm also exploits norms of politeness. We don't like to ask hard questions early because it feels rude. Manipulators depend on that courtesy. Counter this with neutral curiosity. Frame verification as interest rather than interrogation. Say, I'm curious, how did that go? Or that sounds impressive. I'd love to learn more. This keeps you in a role of learner rather than skeptic, which is less likely to trigger defensiveness and more likely to yield truthful answers. Emotional regulation remains essential. Charisma can trigger strong positive feelings, excitement, affection, admiration, that narrow attention. Use emotion labeling when this happens. I'm feeling excited by this. I want to make sure my excitement isn't leading me to rush. That phrase both acknowledges your experience and creates breathing room for deliberation. You can enjoy the rush without letting it be the basis for a life-altering decision. A set of short scripts are useful in the moment. Keep them simple, calm, and curious. That's flattering. I like you and I want to think this through. Can you tell me more about how that worked in practice? I'd love to check references before deciding. I enjoy our chemistry. I'm not ready to make big commitments yet. Practice delivering these lines with neutral tone. Charm often collapses when met with steady, composed responses. A practical exercise sharpens your diagnostic sense. Over the next 2 weeks, pick 3 new social interactions where someone demonstrates strong warmth or confidence. A networking event, a date, a meeting. For each interaction, jot down 3 observations. What the person said, what they offered, gifts, favors, promises, and 1 verifiable fact you could check later. After interaction, follow up on that fact, a LinkedIn profile, an email, a mutual contact. Note whether verification matched the story. This simple habit trains your curiosity muscle without turning you cynical. Role play is another high-leverage practice. With a friend, rehearse being charmed and applying the pause scripts. Let the friend play someone who quickly escalates intimacy or makes impressive claims. Practice the tests. Ask for details, request a small verification, and practice leaving the decision open. Role play makes your responses automatic and reduces the chance of being swept away in real time. Finally, remember that charisma is not a moral defect. Many deeply moral and effective people are also charismatic. The point is to treat charm as data, not as gospel. Enjoy warmth, accept compliments, and be present, but preserve your right to check, verify, and delay when consequences matter. Doing so keeps you open to genuine connection while protecting your autonomy. In the next chapter, we'll explore coercion, threats, and the use of power to force compliance, the blunt instruments of dark psychology. You'll learn to recognize coercive frames, to distinguish force from influence, and to build practical responses that protect your safety and agency. Chapter 6. Coercion is the blunt edge of dark psychology, where charm and subtle influence seek to steer. Coercion pushes corners and demands. It shows up as explicit threats, implied consequences, economic or social pressure, or the slow extraction of control through leverage. This chapter is about recognizing coercive frames, distinguishing legitimate authority from coercive force, and building responses that protect your safety and preserve agency. Above all, this chapter treats coercion as a spectrum, sometimes obvious and violent, sometimes quiet and structural, and gives you practical tools for each point on that spectrum. Start by naming what coercion feels like in practice, a narrowing of options, an insistence that there is only one acceptable choice, a consequence that isn't proportionate to refusal. Coercion often uses leverage, money, reputation, access, children, legal threats, or secrets to make the cost of saying no intolerable. Unlike persuasion, which invites consent, coercion manufactures compliance by raising the price of dissent. The first offensive move is to notice that your choice is being reframed from voluntary to constrained. That recognition changes everything. It signals you seek options, gather evidence, and prioritize safety. There are common templates for coercion. The direct threat is explicit. Do this or I'll do X. The conditional withdrawal is subtler. If you don't do this, I'll withdraw support, affection, or career help. Financial coercion means making access to money conditional on obedience. Legal coercion weaponizes paperwork, threats of lawsuits, or the threat of involving authorities, sometimes truthfully, sometimes as a bluff. Social coercion leverages public shaming, outing, or reputational harm. Coercive control in intimate relationships blends many of these: financial restriction, social isolation, surveillance, and threats, and often builds slowly so the victim normalizes small losses of autonomy until the situation becomes imprisoning. Distinguishing legitimate authority from coercion matters. Doctors, police, and employers have legitimate power in specific contexts. Their requests may be binding within a professional role. But even legitimate power can become coercive when it's deployed outside its scope, when it promises retaliation for a reasonable disagreement, or when it leverages fear rather than reason. A manager asking for overtime is normal. Withholding pay or threatening career sabotage for refusal crosses into coercion. When in doubt, ask, is there a proportional, transparent reason for this demand? Is there a formal channel to dispute it? If the answer is no, treat the interaction with caution. Practical defenses against coercion fall into three broad categories: de-escalation and safety, evidence and documentation, and strategic exit planning. De-escalation and safety are first and foremost when immediate harm is possible. If you face an explicit violent threat, prioritize safety. Get to a secure place, call emergency services if safe to do so, and involve trusted people. If the coercion is nonviolent but threatening, legal threats, reputational threats, avoid reactive escalation. Keep your tone neutral. Ask for specifics in writing. And do not post public responses that could inflame the situation. A single angry message can be used against you. Measured, documented replies are harder to weaponize. Evidence and documentation are powerful because coercion depends on ambiguity and intimidation. Keep records of conversations, demands, and any promises made. When someone threatens you, ask for the threat in writing if safe. That request often stops bluff threats because most coercers rely on heat-of-the-moment pressure rather than a durable trail. In workplaces, follow formal complaint procedures and keep copies of emails and performance reviews. In relationships, private time-stamped notes, save messages, and witness accounts establish a factual baseline. Documentation isn't only for legal fights. It helps you see pattern and gives you options you didn't have when everything felt elastic and personal. Strategic exit planning means preparing to disengage in ways that minimize risk and maximize your options. Coercive situations often trap people by cutting off resources, finances, housing, social support. Rebuilding escape routes is practical. A hidden emergency fund, copies of important documents stored securely, a trusted friend or family member who knows your plan, and a local support network, legal aid, domestic abuse services, employee unions. Exit planning is not dramatic, it's methodical. Small steps that accumulate to real freedom. If you are worried about retaliation, consult professionals, lawyers, social workers, domestic violence hotlines before confronting the coercer. Language and scripts are useful because coercion often depends on emotional reactions. When threatened, short, calm statements protect you and set limits. I will not be coerced. If you have a legal concern, put it in writing and I will respond to my lawyer. Or, I will negotiate when I'm being threatened. We can discuss this with a mediator. For emotional withdrawal or manipulative conditional love scripts, a steady boundary line works. I care about our relationship, but not at the cost of my safety/well-being. If you continue to threaten me, I will leave the conversation. These are not ultimatums you bluff with. They should be lines you will enforce. When the coercion is structural, unfair company policies, legal systems designed to disadvantage someone, economic coercion, collective action is often the best defense. Workplace coercion can be challenged through unions, HR, or coordinated complaints. Community-level coercion, predatory lending, systematic exclusion, benefits from organizing, legal advocacy, and public exposure. Structural coercion is harder to fix alone. Shared power reduces individual vulnerability. Role play and rehearsal build readiness. Practice saying your scripts out loud. Rehearse contacting emergency services, calling a lawyer, or summarizing events into a concise written log. The muscle memory of calm action reduces panic and prevents the coercer from hijacking your responses with pressure. In non-urgent situations, simulate an interaction where someone leverages your finances or reputation. Practice requesting written clarification and delaying response. The more procedural your reaction, the less emotional ammunition the coercer has. There are ethical and legal considerations. If a threat involves illegal activity or potential harm, involve appropriate authorities, but be mindful of contexts where authorities may not be safe or effective. Certain domestic abuse scenarios corrupt systems. In those cases, prioritize local support organizations and legal counsel before making moves that could escalate danger. If a coercer threatens to reveal true but embarrassing information, consider whether professional advice, a lawyer or counselor, can help you craft a response that reduces leverage. Never pay extortion without consulting legal counsel. Payment rarely ends coercion and often escalates it. Finally, cultivate a resilience mindset. Coercion aims to make you small and anxious. The opposite posture, calm, deliberate, and externally oriented, robs coercion of its psychological power. Strengthen your networks. Practice small boundary enforcement daily, and keep a running list of resources you can call on quickly. A lawyer, a trusted friend, a support service. Those small preparations are insurance. They cost little but make coercion much harder to sustain. Coercion is frightening because it attacks the simplest human freedom, the ability to choose. The practical response is sober and simple. Prioritize safety, document the coercive moves, create exit paths, and involve allies when needed. Those actions don't guarantee comfort, but they restore control. In the next chapter, we'll examine manipulation that uses technology and surveillance, the digital arms of dark psychology, and practical steps to protect privacy, reputation, and mental space in an always connected world. Chapter 7. The digital world amplified everything we already knew about influence, speed, scale, subtlety, and added a few new weapons: surveillance, automation, and uncanny synthetic media. Technology doesn't invent manipulation so much as supercharge it. Where a con once needed time and proximity, a campaign now can be launched from a keyboard and aim precisely at your fears, desires, or reputation. This chapter walks you through the modern arsenals: surveillance capitalism, micro-targeting, bots, phishing, doxing, and deepfakes, and gives straightforward, usable defenses so you can keep your life private, your reputation intact, and your mind less trafficked by algorithmic persuasion. Start with a marketplace that fuels a lot of digital manipulation. Data, every app you use, every form you fill, every free service you accept collects signals about you. What you click, where you go, what you buy, who you talk to, and how long a headline holds your attention. That profile powers predictive algorithms that serve you content designed to nudge behavior. An advertisement at the exact moment you're vulnerable, a news feed curated to keep you outraged, a product suggestion timed to exploit a short-term impulse. The business model is attention and action. Persuasion is the product. The first defense is awareness. Treat data as currency. Ask what you are paying for a service with your attention, and with the bits of you that get monetized. Micro-targeting is a tactic that takes broad persuasion and makes it personal. Campaigns, political, commercial, or malicious, can segment audiences into tiny cohorts and deliver tailored messages that trigger specific emotions. Unlike a public speech, a micro-targeted message rarely invites scrutiny because it appears private. The antidote is twofold: reduce the data that builds a profile and increase skepticism of private messages that feel oddly precise. Use privacy settings, limit app permissions, clear cookies regularly, and think twice before answering targeted emotional appeals delivered via direct message or ad. Bots and coordinated networks create artificial consensus. A swarm of fake accounts can amplify a story, manufacture outrage, or drown out dissenting voices. One way to spot manufactured consensus is to look for pattern. Many accounts created recently, repetitive phrasing, or accounts that never engage in normal conversational give and take. If a sudden chorus appears around a claim, and most of the accounts seem hollow or newly minted, assume coordinated amplification and treat the claim with caution. Phishing and social engineering attacks exploit the oldest human vulnerabilities, trust and haste, but use modern tools to look convincing. The email from your bank, the urgent message from a colleague with a link, the friend's account that suddenly asks for money. All are variations on the same theme. The simplest rule: never click an unexpected link or give credentials in response to an unsolicited request. Verify through another channel. If your boss messages you on chat asking for a transfer, call them. If a service messages you about suspicious activity, go to the official website by typing the address yourself rather than following the link. Doxing and online harassment weaponize personal information. A vindictive ex, a political adversary, or malicious stranger can assemble addresses, photos, employer details, and then broadcast them. The damage multiplies when combined with mob behavior. The practical defenses: minimize your public footprint, separate personal from professional accounts, and remove unnecessary personal details from profiles. Use privacy settings aggressively. Make social accounts private, limit visibility of friend lists, and remove location history where possible. For sensitive situations, consider using alternate contact information, a separate email or a P.O. box, and telling only a small circle about your real whereabouts. Deep fakes and synthetic media are the newest and most disorienting tools. A convincing audio clip or video can create the illusion you said something you didn't, or place you somewhere you were not. The best defenses are both preventive and reactive. Preventive steps reduce the chance someone will try to use synthetic content against you. Control the spread of intimate or unedited footage. Be wary of participating in viral video trends that require revealing personal or identifying information, and keep backups of original media. Reactively, verify sources, check timestamps, corroborate with independent witnesses, and look for telltale inconsistencies, odd lip syncing, mismatched lighting, unnatural facial movement. Use reverse image search to trace where an image first appeared, and ask others to help verify. If you become the target of a deepfake, preserve the fake and the context, document who circulated it, and contact platform providers to request takedowns while consulting legal advice when appropriate. Practical digital hygiene is surprisingly high leverage. Use a password manager so every account has a strong, unique password. Turn on two-factor authentication, 2FA, preferably through an authenticator app or hardware key rather than SMS when possible. Regularly review connected apps and revoke permissions you don't use. Keep software and operating systems updated. Security patches close common attack vectors. Back up important data in encrypted form. Consider using privacy-focused tools where you can browsers that block trackers, ad blockers, and privacy-respecting search engines. A small upfront investment in these habits reduces both nuisance phishing and serious breaches. Your digital footprint is also a narrative. Regularly audit what the internet says about you. Once a quarter, search your name, check results, and note whether anything is outdated, harmful, or personal. Ask sites to remove content when feasible. Many platforms have mechanisms for takedown requests, and some jurisdictions have privacy laws that can help, but don't rely on them alone. Keep a folder with copies of important IDs, account recovery phrases, and a list of who to contact if something goes wrong, platform support, a lawyer, a cyber forensics expert if needed. Scripts and small rituals help when you're under digital pressure. For suspicious messages, I'm not clicking links or sending credentials. Please email details to my work address and I'll confirm. For sudden reputation attacks, I'm aware of this content and I'm documenting it. Can you tell me where you saw it first? For an unexpected friend request from someone you know, I'll verify. Can you message me from your main account? These short responses by time gather data and prevent impulsive reactions that manipulators count on. There's also an important social dimension. Algorithmic persuasion works best when it's private and social. Talk with people you trust about what you see online. Ask for perspectives before reacting to a viral outrage, and deliberately diversify your information sources. Algorithms reward repeat engagement. Breaking the cycle of reactive sharing reduces the fuel available to manipulative campaigns. If you face targeted harassment, Escalation looks like this. Document everything. Preserve originals. Report to platform providers. Contact your employer if relevant. And seek legal counsel for options like cease and desist letters or privacy injunctions. For threats to safety, involve law enforcement, but be mindful of contexts where police may be unhelpful or unsafe. In those cases, reach out to specialized digital safety organizations or legal aid groups. Finally, cultivate a digital resilience mindset. Technology both widens attack surfaces and democratizes defenses. You don't need to be a tech expert to protect yourself. You need habits, unique passwords, 2FA, cautious clicking, privacy settings, and periodic audits. When something strange happens online, pause, document, verify, and involve others. The goal isn't paranoia, it's sober competence. The internet is full of mirrors and tricks, but it's also a tool for connection, work, and joy. Use it with care. Keep your borders firm, and you'll make a friend instead of an ambush. In the next chapter, we'll look at influencing groups and institutions, cults, workplaces, and political movements, and how dynamics in those settings make manipulation diffuse, potent, and sometimes invisible. Chapter 8. People are rarely manipulated in isolation. Most of the time, the social environment does much of the work for a manipulator. Groups, institutions, and movements provide cover, normalize extremes, and turn private doubts into collective habits. This chapter examines how influence operates when it's distributed across many people and structures. Cults and high-control groups, toxic workplaces, activist movements that slide into coercion, and political organizations that weaponize identity. The aim is not to diagnose entire movements as bad, but to give you the tools to see dynamics early, to preserve your moral compass within groups, and act in ways that protect both your values and your well-being. Start with a simple truth. Groups change what individuals consider normal. When enough people behave or talk a certain way, the behavior becomes a norm. The process is subtle. Repeated conversations, shared jargon, rituals, and reward structures shape what's acceptable. Normalization is efficient. It coordinates behavior, but it can also make harmful acts feel ordinary. Many scandals begin not with a single monstrous person, but with slow drift. Small compromises, private jokes, and a spirit of we do what it takes. That drift is how institutions slowly adopt practices that, outside the group, would be unthinkable. A second mechanism is diffusion of responsibility. In groups, individual accountability fades. When decisions are made collectively, members assume someone else will stop abuses. When that doesn't happen, harm grows. Bureaucratic language and processes make this easier. Decisions buried in committees or protocol can absolve direct responsibility. Recognize the temptation to say, "It wasn't my call." It's human, but it's also how moral hazards multiply. Defending yourself and others requires insisting on clear ownership and refusing to hide behind vague processes. Groupthink and information silos are close cousins. Strong cohesion often reduces dissent. Groups that prize unanimity discourage questions, redefine criticism as betrayal, and reward loyal repetition. Over time, contrarian voices get ostracized or self-censor. The group becomes confident but blind. One practical defense is to cultivate a dissent routine, a simple, institutionalized practice where one person is explicitly assigned to raise skeptical questions. That tiny ritual preserves cognitive diversity and makes critique normative rather than transgressive. Rituals, jargon, and stage dramatics create identity and belonging, very powerful social goods. They also create barriers to exit. When belonging is tied to costly signals, sacrifices, public displays, or exclusive knowledge, leaving costs more than simply walking away. You lose friends, status, and sometimes livelihood. Manipulative groups exploit that cost to enforce compliance. Awareness helps. Ask whose needs a ritual serve, what behavior is rewarded, and whether the cost of participation aligns with your values. If rituals consistently shame you for private life, demand secrecy, or require escalating commitments, treat the group with suspicion. Power asymmetries inside groups are another risk. Leaders who concentrate decision-making, refuse transparency, and punish curiosity create fertile ground for abuse. Watch for no-questions cultures, leaders who admonish critics with moral language, or leadership that lives by different rules than members. Legitimate authority should be accountable, transparent, and open to correction. When leaders cannot explain basic decisions or react with punitive tactics to reasonable critique, the organization is leaning toward control rather than collaboration. There are practical tactics you can use inside groups to reduce the risk of manipulation without becoming a lone gadfly. First, externalize decisions of consequence. Put important choices into writing, require a record of who decided what and why, and insist on simple, democratic check for actions that affect rights or livelihoods. Second, institutionalize doubt. Create a regular red team whose job is to test assumptions. Third, limit secret keeping. Secrecy concentrates power. Transparency distributes it. If someone insists that certain matters must remain secret without a clear, proportional reason, ask for justification and for third-party oversight. When you encounter pressure, conform, whether at work, in a movement, or in a social circle. Small scripts protect you and others. Use neutral curiosity. Help me understand why this is necessary. Or, can you walk me through the approval process for that? These phrases neither accuse nor inflame. They convert pressure into a request for procedure. If the group uses moral language to demand loyalty, reply with a values check. I agree with our goals. I'm asking whether this tactic aligns with our principles. That reframes the debate from personality to policy. Whistleblowing and dissent are sometimes necessary but costly. If you consider exposing misconduct, prepare first. Document consistently. Keep copies of relevant files and know your organization's complaint channels. Seek allies. Lone complaints are easier to dismiss than collective concerns. Where safety or legal risk is present, consult external counsel or trusted advocacy groups before acting publicly. If you decide to blow the whistle, narrate facts calmly, provide evidence, and name the harm to third parties rather than making it solely about personality. The most credible complaints show patterns and consequences, not only moral outrage. Collective action is also the antidote to structural manipulation. Employers, communities, and movements can be pressured to change by organized, principled coalitions. When many people coordinate, using documented grievances, transparent aims, and proportional tactics, institutions are more likely to respond than to rely on isolated complaints. If you see systemic problems, find others who share the concern and consider whether collective, accountable solutions are possible. Formal complaints, petitions, union action, public exposure through careful channels. Protecting your own moral compass in a group also requires personal practices. Keep outside relationships and information channels. Regularly check your choices against people who don't participate in the group. They'll see drift you may miss. Keep a values ledger, a short list of principles you refuse to violate, and a running note of moments when you felt uneasy. That ledger is a diagnostic tool. Patterns in it signal whether change is temporary or systemic. Exit strategies matter. Leaving a manipulative group is often the safest and healthiest option, but exit is easier when planned. Maintain financial independence where possible. create social ties outside the group, and prepare an emotional and practical transition plan. Exiting isn't betrayal. It's a rational choice to preserve your integrity and well-being. Finally, remember complexity. Not every committed community is a cult. Not every strong leader is abusive. Groups can do extraordinary good and also harbor pockets of harm. The point is not to judge, but to be vigilant. Watch for normalization of deviance. Insist on transparency. Cultivate dissent and prepare exits. When you act collectively and morally, institutions bend toward accountability. When you accept silence and secrecy, they bend toward control. Your responsibility is simple and powerful. Notice the drift, keep records, ask for process, and don't let belonging become an argument for surrendering your judgment. In the next chapter, we'll close the book by tying these threads into a sustainable practice. How to build a life that resists manipulation without becoming isolated, cynical, or reactive. You'll leave with practical daily routine, a few essential scripts, and a long-term plan for cultivating autonomy and connection. Chapter 9. Living a life that resists manipulation is less about one dramatic confrontation and more about daily habits, small systems, and a social architecture that supports your judgment. You don't become immune to influence. No one does. But you can build predictable practices that make you resilient. Habits that slow down fast thinking. Rituals that preserve evidence and boundaries. Relationships that offer reality checks. And a moral compass that's practiced rather than merely stated. This chapter turns the tactics and offenses you've learned into a sustainable program you can carry into work, family, and the messy places between. Begin with routines that create mental space. The single most common reason people fall for manipulation is time pressure combined with emotional intensity. The antidote is a set of friction rituals that you apply whenever a consequential decision appears. These are small, repeatable actions that buy time and clarity. Pause for a fixed interval, even 10 minutes. Write the request down in a single sentence and ask one verification question. Make those 3 steps automatic by attaching them to a cue, a loud request, a sudden compliment, or an urgent deadline. Over time, the pause becomes a habit, and the manipulator's preferred state, rush, opacity, hot emotion, stops working so well. Rituals are boring and effective. They let slow thinking do its job. Build a simple decision checklist for medium and high-stakes choices. Keep it short. 1. What exactly is being asked? 2. Who benefits? 3. Is there evidence or documentation? 4. Have I slept on it? 5. Who outside this interaction should I consult? Run any important request through the checklist. It's easier to enforce a one-page rule than to rely on willpower in the heat of the moment. When people know you have a checklist, manipulators often move on to easier targets. Practice minimalist documentation. Keep a single private log, a note app, an email folder, or a physical notebook where you record agreements, promises, and moments that felt off. Make an entry within 24 hours of anything that matters. The habit is inexpensive and it preserves a running trail that prevents gaslighting, clarifies patterns, and reduces the psychological burden of replaying events in your head. If you work or live in contexts where documentation is standard, Teams, legal settings, make the default mode. I'll email a summary of what we agreed is a neutral, professional move that also protects you. Strengthen your conversational muscle by rehearsing short scripts for frequent situations. Keep them simple, low drama, and true to your voice. I need time to think. Can we put that in writing? I'm not comfortable deciding now, and I'm willing to help in this specific, limited way. Practice them until they feel ordinary. The first time you use a script in anger or fear, it's hard. The 20th time, it's just a competent response. Scripts are not tricks. They're manners for weighed conversations. Invest in your emotional toolkit. Emotional regulation isn't a moral failing you either have or don't have. It's a set of practices you can cultivate. Start with micro practices. A 2-minute breathing break. When you feel pressured, naming the emotion aloud. I notice I'm getting defensive. And anchoring phrases that pull you back into your body. Feet on the floor, hands open. Over weeks, add a weekly reflective habit. A short journal entry where you note one moment you felt pressured, how you responded, and what you might do differently next time. Emotional fitness builds slowly, and small, consistent practices compound. Design your social network with defense in mind. Manipulation thrives when you're isolated or when your social circle mirrors the manipulator's narrative. Keep a small, trusted set of people who know how you actually make decisions. A friend who will ask the obvious question. A mentor who will check your assumptions. A partner who tolerates your "I need time" rule. Don't overshare with everyone. Make transparency selective. Create a default practice of running consequential decisions by at least one external person before committing. That one external perspective often reveals the pattern you missed. Financial and practical scaffolding reduces coercive leverage. A modest emergency fund. Copies of important documents stored privately, and clear partitioning of personal and shared accounts are not glamorous, but they matter. Financial independence may not be immediately achievable for everyone, but incremental moves, a separate bank account, a backup of critical IDs, a saved contact list of helpers, accumulate into real options. Coercers rely on scarcity. Practical buffers shrink their power. Cultivate intellectual humility and habits of curiosity. Manipulators prey on certainty. Your defense benefits from being comfortable with uncertainty. Read widely, not to accumulate arguments, but to notice how narratives form and bend. Listen to dissenting viewpoints and practice asking sincere questions. What would change my mind? This temperament makes you a harder target because you're used to interrogating claims rather than reflexively endorsing them. Institutionalize safeguards where you can. At work, push for transparent decision-making, written approvals for major changes, and a culture where one designated person plays the devil's advocate. In families or shared households, set expectations for money, time, and emotional labor early, and put them in writing when necessary. Small governance structures protect everyone from drift and reduce the moral load on individuals. Train with low-risk simulations. Role-play difficult conversations with a friend. A pushy colleague asking for uncompensated work, a romantic partner pressuring for a quick commitment, or a vendor offering a too-good-to-be-true deal. Practicing responses in safe space builds automaticity. Another useful simulation is the premortem. Imagine a decision went badly and ask what red flags you missed. This backward thinking sharpens foresight. Keep an ethics ledger. Write 3 principles that matter to you: honesty, consent, autonomy, for example, and a short definition of what each looks like in practice. When you face pressure, compare the situation to your ledger. Does proceeding violate a principle? This external standard is steadier than momentary emotion and helps you make consistent choices. Finally, cultivate generosity without surrender. Defending yourself does not require becoming guarded, cynical, or closed off. The techniques in this book are about preserving agency, so you can give from abundance rather than scarcity. Generosity that's freely chosen and sustainably given is an antidote to manipulation because it comes with clear boundaries and consent. Practice saying yes in ways that are real. A capped favor, a one-time help, a referral. Things that express care without dissolving your autonomy. The daily life of anti-manipulation is ordinary. Small pauses, written notes, a phone call to a friend, a practice phrase, a tiny emergency fund, a weekly reflection. Those seemingly small things accumulate into a durable habit. You become someone who thinks slowly about what matters and acts kindly from a place of clarity. That is not heroic. It's practical, grounded, and profoundly liberating. In the final chapter, we'll tie these practices into a concluding argument about responsibility, ethics, and the kind of relationships worth cultivating. We'll close with a compact cheat sheet you can carry and a short set of commitments to keep your autonomy intact without losing connection. Chapter 10. We began this book by admitting a simple, uncomfortable fact. Influence is everywhere, and some of it is aimed at taking your mind, time, money, or dignity. That admission can feel heavy, as if the world is one long gauntlet of predators and scams. But the true, less dramatic truth is more useful. Most manipulation succeeds because it meets ordinary human needs and habits. The need to belong, the desire to be helpful, the rush of an urgent choice. And because we rarely build the small habits that protect us. This book has been about building those habits. Small, repeatable practices that restore autonomy without turning you into a hermit or a cynic. If you take nothing else away, keep this. Defensibility is ordinary. It is a pause before you answer pressured text. It is a 5-minute check before you wire money. It is a simple sentence, spoken calmly, that turns a manipulative exchange into a procedural one. I'll reply after I check. The manipulator wants heat and fuzz. Your task is to install friction and light. Friction slows down predatory patterns. Light exposes them. Together they make exploitation much harder. You've learned how influence works at many scales, from the micro, anchoring, flattery, guilt, to the macro, group dynamics, structural coercion, algorithmic persuasion. You've learned practical counters, naming and documenting events, information hygiene, small script that preserve dignity, exit planning for dangerous situations, and daily rituals that make reflective choice automatic. You've practiced emotional containment, not suppression. You've practiced verification without rudeness. You've learned to treat charisma as data rather than truth. Those are not heroic skills. They are habits of ordinary competence. Habits anyone can build. A final, crucial theme is ethics. Knowledge about influence cuts both ways. It would be easy and ethically bankrupt to use these pages as a manual for harm. That temptation matters to name. Power without restraint breeds damage. The defensive skills here are also ethical tools. They let you refuse to be the default rescuer, to protect vulnerable people in your care, and to create spaces where consent and clarity matter. Use these tools to protect, not to exploit. When you hold boundaries, do so with humility. When you verify, do so with curiosity. When you leave a toxic situation, do so without relish. The point is to restore dignity, yours and others. Practical living advice matters more than rhetoric. Below is a compact cheat sheet you can carry mentally and physically. Treat it as the pocket version of what you've practiced. Cheat sheet, 10 quick habits. Pause. Apply a fixed delay, 10 minutes or one night, before important decisions. Note. Make a one-line log of promises, hurtful incidents, and pressured asks within 24 hours. Check. Verify surprising claims with a second channel or a simple fact check. Script. Keep 3 neutral lines ready, e.g., I need to think. Can you put that in writing? I'll talk after I check. Anchor yourself. Ask who benefits from this request and why now. Use friction. Convert verbal agreements into simple written confirmations. Externalize emotion. Name what you feel aloud to reduce hijacking. I'm noticing I feel pressured. Protect accounts. Unique passwords plus 2FA plus periodic privacy audits. Keep a small emergency fund and copies of key documents for exit options. Run big decisions by one trusted person before committing. Those habits are practical because they're cheap to implement and high impact in result. You don't need to be perfect. You only need to be consistent. A short set of commitments will help you keep the work alive. Try these for 30 days and notice the difference. Daily commitments for 30 days. When pressured, take the pause. No exceptions. Make one log entry weekly about a borderline interaction. Use one script aloud in a real situation, not in rehearsal. Verify one claim before sharing it. Reach out to one person in your circle for an observational check-in. These commitments create a feedback loop. Small acts produce data, your logs. Data produces patterns. Patterns inform decisions, and decisions build confidence. Over time, the practice changes your default reflexes. You move from being reactive to being deliberate. A few final practical reminders. Document early, not later. Ask for process when someone asks for compliance. Accept kindness without becoming obligated. And remember that leaving is sometimes the most moral option. If a relationship, job, or group repeatedly asks you to sever your internal compass, the steady, small voice that answers, "Does this feel right?" You owe it to yourself to listen. You are not an island. The techniques in this book assume relationships. People who can check you, friends who will ask the blunt question you don't want to hear, and professionals who can help when danger or law is involved. Cultivate those ties. Build them slowly. Share the skills you find useful with people you care about. The more a community practices clear consent, documentation, and friction, the less work manipulators can do. Last, be gentle with yourself. Learning to spot manipulation sometimes reveals that you've been targeted before. That realization can sting. It's not a mark of weakness. It's a mark of being human in a social world. The work here is repair and prevention, not punishment. Use what you've learned to rebuild trust. In your judgment, in healthy relationships, and in institutions that are worthy of that trust. If you carry one sentence forward from this book, let it be this: autonomy is practiced, not declared. Protecting your mind is a sum of many small, ordinary acts. Do them daily. Teach them to people around you, and you'll find that the world doesn't become colder. It becomes clearer, kinder, and more honest.